9, and it is on page 9, it commences page 9 and runs through for several hundred. We'll come to that now. Welcome Jacques Victor and Denise O'Shaughnessy from the team who have been at the forefront from the staff perspective of leading this. Members, I will move, and I think the Mayor will second. Mayor will second, so I'll move and second it. And I'll just introduce it. This is, I hope I'm fairly reflecting all of us here in my words, and I'm at the outset grateful to all of the members, every one of us on the Planning Committee, from Mayor, councillors, independent Maori statutory board members, and not necessarily in that order, just all of us collectively. Thank you for your work on this. It's been tremendous. It's been a long innings, some 18 months, if not more, to adopt the Auckland Plan 2050. It's the culmination of significant work of not just us, but our communities of Auckland as well, key stakeholders, a whole range of people. It does demonstrate the need for Auckland to be looking out, to be doing things today, yes, but to be looking out long and plotting a course for the future. So this document is forward-thinking, it is long-range, and it navigates our way into that long-range future. And there are some fundamental differences in this version of the Auckland Plan, and the Auckland Plan from 2012 was an outstanding document, but of course we've learned a lot since then and things have changed since then. Probably the most fundamental change is the understanding now that we have for integrated planning in everything that we do. And this document, it lays the platform for future integrated decision making of ourselves and other entities across council and even Auckland. And of course that commences in our 10-year budget and our annual budgets. It guides us on some tremendous challenges that we've got as a city through to 2050, but it also frames it in a way that we see opportunity in those challenges. They're not just hurdles and barriers, and they are, but there is tremendous opportunity for us to grow as a city and grow into those challenges. We're the only city where statute of the Parliament requires us to look long, to look out 30 years. In fact, the statute says to look out 20 to 30 years. It requires us to have a long-term strategy for our growth and development. It says that that strategy should be comprehensive and effective. And I know that this plan does all of that. But a lot has changed since 2012, not the least being that we now have a unitary plan. So we've delivered on a lot of what the first Auckland Plan asked of us. The future urban land supply strategy. The Maori Plan is a significant change. Treaty settlements are a significant change. The Tupuna Maunga Authority is a significant change. Where we are in our challenges on housing and transport are significant changes. Climate change and addressing environmental issues. We're in a very different place now, and I think we understand the urgency of all of those. And then, of course, we've got infrastructure underway that was signalled in the first plan. A lot of it is completed. Waterview Connection, for example. The CRL is underway. We've signed up to the Housing Accord with government. So a lot has moved from 2012. The 2050 document focuses, yes, at a high level on how Auckland unfolds, particularly through the development strategy of the plan. And then we have the 6 key outcome areas, and it is very much outcomes focused, this plan, rather than a collation of topics and sectors. And we've got the 6 key outcomes, and then cascading down from that, we have those key directions and focus areas. It's all about achievement. Yes, reflecting on where we've come from, reflecting on the issues of today, but anticipating the challenges of days to follow and looking at how we meet those challenges. This time it's digital, it's not a doorstop, though it was a very colourful doorstop, the original one, and a very good doorstop, and a good coffee table book, and a good reference for our staff, and that's the most important thing. This one, being digital, allows us to update it as information comes to hand, and we could think about the 2018 census data that we'll be seeing early next year that allows us to take the digital plan and update it. And it is certainly a lot more cost effective to do it this way. The bill for the print copies and updating a print copy is enormous. I want to dwell on the engagement that we've had, because this plan is all about collaboration right across Auckland. We undertook a two-stage engagement plan. You'll remember very early on, we tested some ideas and then we went back with our draft. 104 key stakeholders and partners from central government, of course, our CCOs, mana whenua, mātāwaka, 9 advisory panels and boards, 26 infrastructure sector groups. There are 22 other sector groups, that's public groups, 16 private sector organisations, and we had 2 neighbouring councils south of us participate, and the Upper North Island Strategic Alliance. And not forgetting the tremendous and ongoing and extremely valuable feedback and contributions that we've had from the Independent Maori Statutory Board. Since the draft, there's been some very deliberate work with government. There's been a close alignment with government on this document, and they have lent their support to the development strategy, which I think is very important. ATAP, of course, informs our transport and access outcome, and ultimately this brings forward a plan not just for Auckland Council, not just for our CCOs, but it's an all of Auckland plan with hopefully a broad sense of ownership. We have undertaken some 26 workshops of our own, and they began way back in February 2017 and concluded recently with some outstanding workshops where we brought the advisory panels in and our local boards. Our local boards have all been part of the journey, but late in the piece we brought in our advisory panels, and for those of us that were at some of those workshops and heard some of the absolute gem contributions come from our advisory panels, I think it's testimony to the massive contribution that the whole of the organisation has made. We had some, I think it was 18,000 submissions. There are 300, out of the submissions for the draft, we've made 300 quite material changes to the plan, 300 material changes. We did not just go out there in a cursory way. We actually went out there to listen, and we listened, and we responded with 300 material changes to the plan. We've got a new focus area to promote participation in arts, culture, sports and recreation. We heard that feedback. There's a much greater emphasis on the rapid transit network and safety. We heard that loud and clear. And of course we reflect ATAP, and we also reflected a lot of feedback coming in on the reference to the affordability of public transport. In the development strategy, we've seen some new development areas in the south, Otara, Clendon and Manurewa. We've got a new quality of life focus area, and we've emphasised the natural environment, not just environment generically, and we've narrowed down on that, and that's reflected in the scope of the outcome. A lot of submissions talked about the need, absolute need to see targets, and we've reflected on that, and we will be looking at an implementation approach with core targets. We'll be working through core targets with government, and then we'll be seeing some future work coming to this committee on some core targets, and you see that in the motions that we're putting up today. So those will sit outside the plan because those core targets need to be also dynamic and changing as we meet those targets. That'll be part of our implementation approach. So 300 material changes, great formal resolutions from our local boards, tremendous input there, and I think this is a considered and deep piece of work, and I'm commending it to this committee for support today. It sets the scene for a pretty good future, and not a pretty good future, an outstanding future for this city, if we can meet those challenges and grab those opportunities that are before us. So this is a plan to take Auckland through to 2050, and to end with, I want to again thank the councillors, the Mayor, the Mayor's office, the independent Maori statutory board members, local board members, advisory panel members, advisory board members, and our staff, and I'll leave it at that with the staff. There is a huge team sitting in behind Jacques and Denise that have been working on this for the last 18 months and prior, gearing it up. And I will finish by taking a bow to all of you for getting us to this place today where we can adopt the Auckland Plan 2050. I'll now go to Jacques and Denise. Jacques and Denise, we've canvassed this well in most recent workshops, and I'm just asking you for a brief reflection today.
Kia ora koutou. Just wanting to make a couple of points around the consultation, which the Chair has already talked about. Obviously a very high level of engagement, over 18,700 submissions. Just wanted to make a couple of points about the Maori engagement, which was much higher than similar other consultation processes, so from 3.6% to 10% from the comparable LTP process 3 years ago. There was a lot of work done with Maori community groups who use their networks across the region to engage on the plan, so that has been hugely beneficial to lifting those levels of engagement. We also reached out to a wider audience through Radio Rātea, so there was debate on that platform, and also Up South, which is a digital platform where participants can share their ideas. So a couple of questions were posed to that platform, and we got some really good input through that. The members of the Asian community, the engagement was much higher than previous engagement processes as well, so lifting to 19% compared to 6% in the 2015 LTP. So there are a number of reasons for that. One of the groups that we worked with very closely was the Chinese New Settlers Services Trust, and they have a well-established network across Auckland, and through that we were able to drive that engagement higher. And very important to ensure too that we close the loop with these groups and tell them how the plan has been finalised. So these have been hard to reach groups in the past, and there have been some real gains there which put us in a good place for future engagements. The digital plan, so this is a first for Council, first time we've delivered a comprehensive strategic digital plan, and it's been a steep learning curve requiring many teams across Council to work together to really bring this into a future focused product that it is, and it will enable us to keep it up to date and keep it and make it a living document. So this really sets us in good stead for the future for any further changes in Auckland that we need to reflect in the plan as time goes on.
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one technicality. At the last workshop of the committee on the 28th, you asked us to go and look at the section in the plan on the treaty, just to make sure that everything is factual, and also to make sure that we work with the IMSB in checking that. We have done that, and what we are about to hand out to you are some changes to that section of the plan, the final changes, which are slightly different from the ones that you see in your agenda. So just to technically finish that off. And that really is about all there is to say.
Thank you. We'll wait for that to be handed out, and if you could just take us to that particular page on the agenda, and we'll just reconcile.
Yep.
It is page 28, I think, isn't it?
Thank you, ma'am.
No, it's not that page.
No.
I'm going to ask, at this stage, while we're waiting, I think I'll invite the IMSB if they would like to make any comment. Does this fairly reflect the feedback that the IMSB has offered members Hinare or Namani?
Kia ora, Chair. The IMSB have been working alongside staff to arrive at a section that we're comfortable with.
Thank you very much, and thanks for your work on that.
Just to clarify, it's page 49 in the agenda, on the agenda papers.
Of the attachment.
Yeah, attachment A.
That's 49. Look, while we're maybe reading that, members can have a browse of that. Are there any questions, members? Councillor Casey.
With regard to this just been given out? Yeah, I have a question. The sentence on the back page that says there will be increased capacity for iwi organisations to engage politically, do we mean by that Maori seats on local councils?
I think that's open. That is yet to be determined, of course, but there is, that is quite deliberately open. It's not being specific. I just checked that with Jacques. That's how I read it.
You answer.
No, that's not about that. That's that's talking about, for example, co-governance arrangements.
Shall I take another question, Councillor Casey, or you're still perusing it?
There was two different versions of what that sentence, well, there's three different versions of what that sentence meant then, so maybe it needs to be tightened a bit?
Well, maybe I didn't help there, but the way I read it is it's not specific about a particular type of governance group. It's generic. It's generic. It's an opening to the possibility, and an example might be more the very authority that you yourself sit on, the Tupuna Maunga Authority, where I think today every decision in 2.5, 3 years has been by consensus.
Maybe just as a way forward, Mr. Chair, so that sentence wasn't changed, that was the original sentence, but maybe what we can do is just after the word politically, add, for example, through co-governance. Just as an example.
Yep. Or, for example, through Maori seats could be another example.
Well, that would be co-governance. So
Yep.
I would recommend that we sit with co-governance, because I think we're going to open up a big can of worms today. I think co-governance might cover it. Member Nunn.
Can I perhaps just add the fact that this section recognises the treaty as the founding document of Aotearoa and is the basis for ongoing partnership between Council and Māori and Tāmaki, Mana Whenua Mātāwaka, I think provides the framework for quite broad conversations about a lot of things, including seats.
Okay, we're all good there? Thank you. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm assuming it's questions at the moment and then comments later?
Yes,
Yep,
so
cool.
I've taken my speaking turn in the introduction.
No, cool bananas. Look, my question is on the first page, and excuse my ignorance here, but you've mentioned 19 mana whenua groups hold customary interests across Auckland and many mātā waka call Auckland home. Now, in regards to any future treaty claims, could that number rise? I only mention it because we're being specific here.
Well, I think that's a bit of a difficult question.
Well,
for these
it
fellows.
is, sorry, I'll wait for, yeah, and then I'll just have a comment. I'll just clarify why I've asked that question.
Okay. I'll ask Luella to answer that.
Through the chair, kia ora, Councillor Filipino. Yes, there is an there is a possibility that the numbers could rise as those hapu start to gain their own ability to stand on their own feet.
Yeah, and that's within Tāmaki Makaurau.
Tāmaki Makaurau.
So would it be advisable that we have currently, there are 19? That just leaves open the possibility that if other, look, I'm just putting it on the table. I see Leanne saying no, but you know, that's the reason for my question.
Can we, look, we're in the final throes. There is scope within the recommendations that are before us today to work out any changes that are the product of today. But they would be sort of minor changes and editorials, because I think we've thrashed the real essence of this plan out at the numerous workshops, and particularly the most recent ones. But can we take that point? I think we've got a response here, but we just need to also hear from Jacques as well. Member Namani.
Kia ora. I just want to make a comment that the 19 mana whenua groups and the 19 mana whenua groups, I don't think there are any others in the woodwork in relation to that. Opening that door, I mean, those mana whenua groups have, for the last decade or so, if not more, you know, been engaged with Auckland Council in different ways, shapes or forms at different levels. But I wouldn't think that we're talking about opening up mana whenua groups. My understanding is those that are identified there are other groups.
Just playing devil's advocate because we're being specific.
Thank you.
That's all.
I think we're going to sit with what we've got. Are you satisfied? And thank you for raising it, Councillor Filipino.
I mean, yeah, look, I'm happy, but playing devil's advocate, knowing the treaty process, and there could be.
Well, Ngāpuhi will tell you when they're coming anyway. So
that's why I mentioned it.
They didn't always tell.
They didn't tell you last time.
yeah,
Did they?
yeah, we didn't. We forgot to tell you the last time.
Yeah. Jacques?
Mr. Chair, that probably would be an example of those things. When things do change, that's the beauty of the digital plan. It's quite easy for us to change that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Councillor Hulse.
Thank you, and I'd like to reserve my right to say something. So my question is, and this is the joy, I think, of the digital format of this, will we be looking at referencing the Auckland plan in our key committee agendas? In other words, the Auckland plan says X, Y, Z, therefore the recommendations are ABC. I'm presuming that we will treat it that way, because, and the reason why I ask that, Mr. Chair, is by agreeing to this today, this does become our founding document, and our decisions that we make need to be congruent with that.
Absolutely. Jacques?
Councillor Hulse, that would be part of what recommendation D is pointing towards. That once this is adopted as an organisation and as Auckland, we're going to have to think about how do we implement it. So that might be one example of some changes that need to happen.
And the reason why I raised that, Mr. Chair, is I'm on a little bit of a mission, and hopefully a successful one at that, in the way that our reports are very clear, open and transparent in the way that they reference where these decisions have come from, and they show quite clearly the whakapapa of the thinking and thought that's gone into it.
Very good point, and thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jacques, my question is on heritage, and just for the benefit of this meeting, noting it's obviously recorded in public, the concerns that have, the major concern on the Auckland plan that's come through me has been around the huge amount of heritage, the 14 pages of the last Auckland plan versus the way that heritage has been addressed in this Auckland plan. Could you please just confirm for me how heritage has been embraced in this Auckland plan, and give me and potentially a lot of Aucklanders confidence that it hasn't been dropped because it's not a separate section in its own? Thank you, as an area of emphasis. Thank you.
Councillor Simpson, I suppose the starting point is that from the 2012 plan, the Unity plan followed that plan, and it did what the first Auckland plan, the direction that it set. So a lot of the protection of heritage was done through the Unity plan. Additional areas of heritage and additional heritage items were added through the Unity plan. So the protection of our heritage is something that is taken care of in the Unity plan. The Auckland plan itself cannot do that. What the 2050 plan does, it is firstly covered in the environment and cultural heritage section of the plan, that outcome, and cultural heritage is defined in there, and it covers the wide gambit of heritage. The term cultural heritage, as opposed to, say, historic heritage, is more, that's the kind of the international approach. That's where people are going by using the term cultural heritage. From that definition in the environment and cultural heritage outcome, it then refers you to the homes and places outcome. Because then one of the changes that the Chair noted early on is in the environment outcome, we have now made it very clear that that's about the natural environment. So it then refers you to the homes and places outcome, and there it covers off the value add of heritage to our urban fabric, what it means, how it plays a role, and how we need to think about that heritage, and specifically around built heritage in going forward, how we need to take that into account in the redevelopment of our urban areas, and how we need to respect and reflect that, and how that is part of the identity of communities. It then also refers you to the belonging and participation outcome in the new focus area about quality of life. Heritage, and specifically again built heritage, is highlighted there as adding to our quality of life. Again, it's the kind of thing that we identify with. It's part of our history. It tells our story. And so that's how the plan takes care of heritage. It doesn't have a particular outcome, but it is captured in a number of the focus areas.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Casey.
Yeah, is this now on the document itself?
Any part of it, yes.
Okay, I've got 3 questions then, Jacques. I think you do the councillors a disservice by failing to spell out how many workshops and how many hours we as a group have put into this document. And I'd quite like you to say just a little bit about that so that it makes me feel better.
Councillor Casey, I would like to acknowledge the numerous workshops that you attended.
No, how many? How many hours? That's what I'd like to hear.
26.
No.
How many hours? I don't know how many hours.
Is it 26 workshops?
26 workshops, usually of 2 to 3 hours, sometimes much more than that.
Yeah, and also acknowledging that those workshops were often really hard because we worked through some substantial issues, and there wasn't always agreement from everybody on those issues, but they were thoroughly debated.
Absolutely.
You have given us direction to make many changes, those changes. So the plan is developed over the past, let's say the past year, and when we really got into the engagement. The plan has changed a lot. And I will also acknowledge you've got us to make many of those changes, speaking on behalf of your communities. So it really has been something that we all developed together, and it has gotten better and better, I think. But you're right, people put many, many hours in, and I'm going to take the opportunity, as you've given me the opening, to also thank staff. There are a large number of staff who over the past year have put many, many hours and many weekends in getting the plan to where it is. So I just want to thank them as well.
So just a note for the future, Jacques, when you list all the, you know, the submissions and everything else, that should be part of it. The amount of hours that elected members put into this plan should be listed. My second question is about the future versions of the plan, and I'm looking at our page 368, and I'm just a bit, I'm still not sure what triggers the statement that major issues or disruptions may require changes to parts of the plan, possibly all of it. Any changes to the plan's direction would need formal consultation. What does all that mean? What triggers a change to the plan's direction? What does that actually mean, a change to the plan's direction? Because what I'm hearing is it's a living document that will be continually updated. So what does that mean? What's a change to direction? Political direction?
Councillor Casey, I suppose they're kind of two types of changes we're talking about. So the one type are the minor things. Let's say the statistics in terms of population growth. And those kind of changes are things that we can make just keeping the plan updated. What we're referring to is if there are major changes, let's say, I'm just going to use a random example. Let's say that Auckland's population actually triples its rate of growth. That is going to require drastic responses in terms of providing infrastructure and services. And that, for example, may require a change to the direction that the plan has at the moment. For us to make a change like that, that cannot be a minor change. That would be a major change, that we would have to go through a political process to set a new direction, to respond to whatever that change might be. I think that's kind of what we're trying to explain there. Two types of changes, some just data, information. Let's say it turns out in a year or two there might be 20 mana whenua groups. That is a change that can be made. That is not fundamental to the direction of the plan. But if there are changes that really needs a change in the principle of what is being said here, that would be a politically directed change. That's essentially what we're saying.
And that's done through this committee? It comes back here?
Or whatever the relevant committee of the whole at that time would be, yeah.
And at the last workshop, we had another quite meaty argument about zero tolerance of racism and how that might be translated. I think there was agreement around the room that we should have some kind of statement in there about just about that, and I'm not quite sure how that's been translated into the new plan.
I'm just going to have to get some help. As you can probably
That's fine.
appreciate, I can't remember
Oh,
every
I
single
thought you'd
thing.
remember that debate, Jack.
I think we all remember the contribution. Can we've got the page?
Yeah, page 74. It's been in the belonging and participation explained. You'll see there's some green text highlighted in green there, which was addressed.
Sorry?
74 of our agenda.
Page 74 on your agenda. So it's the introduction to the belonging and participation outcome. You'll see around the middle of the page.
For everybody. Denise?
Addressing racism and discrimination involves raising awareness. It is the responsibility of all Aucklanders to challenge prejudice and intolerance through our everyday actions.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, probably another technical thing I should have pointed out earlier. All the changes that happened after the last workshop on the 28th, they are tracked in green.
Can't read it though, it's too hard.
Oh, is it on yours?
I beg your pardon?
Quite hard to read in green.
Yeah, probably wasn't the best choice on colour. But just to make it easier for you, so any change we made after the 28th, tracked in green.
I'm told it's very good on the electronic version. If that helps, Councillor Casey.
It doesn't.
I'll show you my phone.
Councillor Wayne Walker.
Cool. Got a few questions, and I guess my first one is just further to the question that Desley asked about culture. There were a large number of submissions that were critical of the lack of reference to sport, arts, more emphasis around heritage, environment. Can you just describe what changes have been made to accommodate them?
Councillor Walker, you're right. There were large numbers of, if I remember correctly, and this is going to be a guess on my part from the workshop, but I think it was around 1,000 submissions that specifically spoke about arts and culture and or sport and recreation, and people wanting to see a bit more of an emphasis in the plan on that. There was some emphasis on both of those in the draft plan, but people felt that it needed some more. And so in response to those submissions, that's where the new focus area, so we created a whole new focus area around quality of life, and that talks about sport and recreation, arts and culture, and built heritage. In terms of the contribution it adds to the quality of life of Aucklanders. And of course that is different for different people, but that is essentially the result of the submissions, is we created a whole new focus area around quality of life.
Okay, got another question just on page 217. That's in the agenda, and it's about climate change. It mentions our involvement, our membership of C40. It doesn't make any mention of our ongoing membership of ICLEI, which is a city's advocacy group that the council has been involved with for some time. And yes, I mean, C40 is critical, but advocacy is also critical at a city level, and I just wonder why there isn't a mention there. That may just be an oversight, and it may be possible to correct that.
Yes, absolutely. We try and highlight certain things. Of course, we don't highlight everything, but if the committee wishes, we can add a link to that as well. Yes.
Thank you. Well, I think we'll just capture that, and I'll just ask the staff to check in with Councillor Hulse on that one, because it crosses over into your committee. If there's any, and that is if there's anything else, Councillor Hulse, that we have membership of that might need to be referenced.
Okay.
Carrying on.
The other question I've got just goes to page 34, and just mentions the effects of climate change. Doesn't mention, I think, what I'd suggest is probably one of the most crucial effects, which is sea level rise. So that's not mentioned. Again, that may just be an oversight, and it may be possible to capture something around that. Nor does it make any reference there to climate change adaptation, which, as you'd know, has been picked up by the government, and that's going to be mandated in terms of a response on our part. That also may just be an oversight, and I just wonder, Mr. Chair, if that's the case, if there could be just some modest addition there.
The very first line refers to sea level rise. It says such as sea level rise.
Yes.
On 34.
But it doesn't capture a mention in the bullet points, Mr. Chair.
So you want coastal inundation and sea level rise to be more specifically referred to?
Yes. I would have thought that they were the effects that were going to impact on us, probably more than anything else.
I'll just go, I think, to Alec.
Yeah, through the chair. So obviously that's kind of a front-end summary. There is quite a detailed supporting information around climate change that talks about the broader impacts, as well as some of the potential interventions and the things that we have to think about, such as a low carbon economy and circular economy and so on. So in the supporting information to the environment and cultural heritage outcome, you'll have a lot of that. Obviously, and as we've talked about in previous workshops, there is other stuff that will come through. So the work that the Sustainability Office is doing around the Auckland Climate Action Plan will obviously fill in some more of that detail and prescribe some of the specific actions. So that page that you referenced, 34, there is a, yeah, as I said, a more detailed information about climate change.
216.
Page 216 onwards.
And 219, and I am looking at that.
Yeah.
I just make the observation that it would be useful to have that right up the front to perhaps reflect some of what occurs later, because not everybody's going to get to the later stuff.
And through the chair, I know that Denise and team have been talking about how people navigate through the plan. So as you know, it's a digital plan. So not everyone and most people probably won't read it page to page, and finding those links is really important. So that's something that we've learned through the consultation process, and we've got a huge amount of analytics around that, and making sure that those links are overt is part of the kind of the final touches to the plan.
And the other question I've got, Mr. Chair, it just goes to page 135, where there's a sentence, given the cost of land, we will not be able to rely exclusively on acquiring new public places to meet the needs of a growing and increasingly urbanised population. I think the concern that I'd raised generally, Mr. Chair, that I've raised often is that it's going to be pretty grim in terms of the amount of recreational space that's going to be available to people, because we're very much trading off the existing reserves that legacy councils have provided. Our development contributions aren't adequate. The situation in brownfield and greenfield areas is, as I say, very grim compared to what Aucklanders have been used to. So I just don't know that we're telling the story as well as we need to there, Mr. Chair. And again, that just may be something that the officers haven't picked up on, that we may be able to add something to.
Thank you. Anything to, I think, take that feedback on board? I think that was being asked for.
Yeah, so maybe, can I just recap on both? So the first was to maybe just add a bullet around sea level rise or inundation and adaptation on page 34. I think that's quite easily done, just in that summary. In terms of the public land, absolutely hear what Councillor Walker is saying. Part of that focus area is, however, to make the point that we need to start thinking differently about what constitutes public space. And so it talks about our road corridors, that you can think about them differently and achieve quite different outcomes if you think about them as something that moves vehicles, but also a place for people. And so that's the key message. But yeah, absolutely, that it isn't saying that there shouldn't be any new reserves. It is just acknowledging there are more than one way of providing public space.
Correct. Thank you.
And I just make the observation, Mr. Chair, that it's actually quite a fundamental shift that's occurring, and my concern is that that doesn't come out. It's going to be quite a dramatic shift in terms of the Auckland of the future compared to what we have now. The other question I've got, and I'm just trying to find the page, the officers may be able to help me. I thought I'd notated it, and that's around the section that covers off the Port of Auckland. And
while you're looking for that, can I go to another questioner?
Well, I can ask the question because I know what the issue is. Is there a reason why we're not referencing the context of the Port of Auckland compared with the other North Island ports, and obviously the possibility of more of a complementary relationship? and perhaps a wider port study.
If I remember correctly, what that section on the port does is it kind of puts in context where we got to as a council through the port study, but then acknowledges the work being done through UNISA and through central government on an Upper North Island logistics strategy, I think.
Does it mention that?
I think it does. If it doesn't mention it specifically, it probably mentions it kind of more vaguely, but there certainly is a reference to more work being done, and that the future of the port at this stage isn't exactly clear, which is why we can't, why we don't take it any further in the plan, because we know that those changes are coming.
Well, I haven't got it in front of me, but my recollection is that there wasn't much of a reference. If there wasn't something there, it must have been very vague.
I can go and double check and make sure that...
Councillor, I think we'll just check that for you, because we know about the so-called Upper North Island Supply Chain Strategy. That's a working title. If we go and put that in there, and the terms of reference are signed off by Cabinet and they call it something else, the language is redundant already. So that's why I thought the staff were trying to reflect the general intention of what we're hearing from government on the very work that you're reminding us of.
I just didn't pick it up, and again, that may be an oversight on my part.
Okay, good.
We'll
just double check, and thank you. Councillor Sayers.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just what, well, maybe three questions that are related. Around the item on homes and spaces, Jacques, and we talk about there in the lead-in that we need to be thinking strategically about secure, healthy and affordable homes, which is good. So my question is perhaps going to the measures that has got associated with those. There's a number of measures in measuring the progress. There's about 5, which we'll monitor going forward.
Councillor Sayers, would you like to bring us to the page reference so that we can all follow you?
Yes, if I could bring you to page, in the agenda page is 369, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Right, Joe? Yeah. Okay. And just down homes and places outcomes, measure number 3 there, housing costs as a percentage of household incomes. Is that it may be defined already, but is that defined already by Auckland Council where we're sitting now, so we can measure, and do we have a target of what we're trying to achieve, Jacques? I'm just trying to get a feel for how we're going to measure that particular measure.
So that particular measure is a kind of an internationally accepted measure for housing costs. Auckland Council does not have a particular target for what it wants that measure to be, or what it wants the ratio to be, but we do know what it is, and it isn't the same for everybody, depending on different groups of communities. That is quite different. The one target that is in the plan around housing is the feasible capacity for dwellings, and that is in line with the NPS. So we have one target in the plan around housing, which isn't this one around the cost. It is around the feasible capacity that we have to provide. But what you will also see in the plan, and also in the actual agenda report, it does talk about the monitoring framework that will be set up and that has to be set up for the plan. In that, there are a lot more measures, and that is also where we are saying we can add targets, existing council targets, or where there are gaps we can develop with council, we can develop targets, and so that might be that council wishes to set a specific target around the ratio of housing costs and income.
Oh, that's very helpful.
We can do that through the implementation.
Okay, thank you. Could I just ask, perhaps related to that, just mentioned that we do know some of the measures currently for different groups and community groups and that. Is that something that the councillors will have access to, or you'll include in the scorecard? I'd just be interested, I think, for councillors to know where we're sitting now with those different groups and how we can gain some visibility on that. And would you like that, is that going to be an ongoing public measure as well.
Yeah. And Denise has just reminded me that in October we will bring to you the baseline report from which we'll do the monitoring, and so we can include that in that baseline report.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sayers. Member Namani.
Oh, kia ora. Just rereading through it last night, I came across a couple of things that I think fit in the parameters of minor edits that will be satisfactorily covered by B, but I just wanted to raise it here just so that you know what I'm referring to. On page 55, so agenda page 55, there's a section on Māori and Tāmaki Makaurau. And again, I think this may also be about just aligning the hard copy with the digital version too. There could be a bit of that. But I note that's the reference to mana whenua mātāwaka, and yet the identifying the 19 iwi and hapu don't come up in the plan until page 70. So it's kind of like it seemed the right place to put it there. These are the types of minor. The table itself, I think it needs to be clear, have a clear table heading that's on page 55, because essentially what you're starting to get into what's essentially demographic, and this is the top 10 iwi by population in the Auckland region. And so I think the lack of a heading, people could infer that perhaps the wrong way when you mix it with mana whenua mātāwaka, and we kind of don't need, that confusion. So that's kind of, it was just a minor issue that I hopefully can just be tidied up in the final draft. There may be a couple of other minor matters of that ilk that I would hope could get captured in the wash-up.
Thank you. I think that just makes a lot of sense.
And Mr. Chair, probably on that note, it still needs a good editing. I have no doubt there might be the odd typo, there might be headings missing, like Leanne has just pointed out. So, and there is a recommendation to give the chair and the deputy chair the delegated authority to just clean up those minor editing things.
Thank you, Member Namani. Councillor Newman.
Yeah, hello. Whilst I've got various views on this Auckland plan, with respect to Focus Area 5, adapt to the changing water future, this is reference page 205 on the agenda, Chair.
Thank you.
I just wonder, and you're saying, how can this be done? You've got a couple of bullet points. I think firstly, because the Auckland region doesn't have a supply of water to sustain its current population, let alone future, we are reliant on water sources outside of the Auckland region. I'm just wondering if there is a need to bullet point that we will work to secure the necessary consents for the taking of potable water from the Waikato in the future. That's the first point. The second point is in your first bullet point, it says, you've made the point, and it's a little ambiguous, this may include finding alternative supplies. I take that as code for, and I support, supporting changes to the technology for the reuse of treated wastewater, which will be put back into the potable water supply. And I'm just wondering, frankly, if we should say that, because that's what's going to end up having to happen. And there's a yuck factor to that, but more and more cities are having to address the issue of security of supply by treating wastewater, bringing it back to an acceptable standard, and then putting it back into the potable water supply. I'm just wondering if we should flag that, because that's in the end where Waterkey will probably need to go. There's a big cost involved with that, but if this is a plan for a generational plan, I'm just wondering if this is the time to say it.
Alec?
So through the chair, yes, you're right. I mean, there is, I guess the subtext there is we are going to have to think about reuse of treated water. We had a really good actual discussion with Watercare in terms of following up from the draft plan, and they were quite encouraged that we were starting that debate because, as you've noted, it is a public perception question. Yeah, I don't know whether we want to make that change now or whether we're happy with the words as they stand, but broadly you're kind of on the money in terms of where we are.
Chair, it's not just the yuck factor. It's substantially more expensive to go and, you know, rather than taking water from a source and then treating it, what you're doing is you're taking wastewater, you're treating it and then putting that back in. So it's about probably 3 times more expensive, but if you want to get security of supply, you have to do it. Yep. And I just think that bullet point is ambiguous. Some people will understand what that means, but I just think that if you're going to start that conversation, just say that that's probably where we're going to have to go, because you're talking about may include. May include doesn't actually tie us back to that, but this is what it means, and we ought to say that if you want to get security of supply, Chair, because otherwise what you're reliant on is continuing to try and take water from a region for which we have minimal jurisdiction. The Waikato does not necessarily guarantee us supply in perpetuity for an expanding population. And I don't know of anyone who wants to go and start to dam the Auckland region for a supply of water.
Can we just check that? So the way it's languaged at the moment, I just want to tease this out. I mean, Councillor Newman highlights the possibility of using black water. We could be using grey water. We could be using local supply, neighbourhood supply. We could be desalinating. There's a whole lot of possibilities here, but we're not. I think what we're trying to do there is signal that there are other means, and work has to be done to arrive at the preferred means.
Yeah. And the other point, though, sorry, through the chair, is the network that you need. So it's not just about taking black water. You need to make sure that the network can support it. So whether or not you're capturing stormwater or capturing wastewater from a house, or as Councillor Darby said, you know, finding alternative groundwater sources, it's all in the preceding, I guess, direction about making sure our networks are resilient, and that ties into the infrastructure strategy as well, which forms part of the development strategy.
What is Watercare saying about this? Sorry.
Mr. Chair, I just wondered if I could short-circuit this with a
short
comment.
Councillor Newman, do you mind a short circuit from Councillor?
I'm always up for short circuiting.
Good, and I hope it's a useful short circuit. Councillor Newman's right on the button, and the discussion that is taking place between Auckland Transport, Watercare and Council in the development of the water strategy, coming to an environmental committee meeting near you soon, will actually expand on exactly this. Can't keep dipping into the Waikato, can't keep stopping people having water tanks, can't keep putting sewage in our harbours, can't keep having stormwater, you know, going to pot around the region. It's all coming together in this one big discussion. So thank you, Councillor Newman, for highlighting it. Urgently needed. We signal it in here. The work is unfolding as we speak.
So it's integrated waters as opposed to not just a single consideration.
This is, and I've avoided calling it the 3 waters strategy because we actually have 5, 6 waters. Yeah. We've got, you know, our artesian waters. We've got a whole bunch of separate waters. This is a fully integrated approach to water, not just how you fling it in pipes and forget it.
Can we take those contributions, Councillor Newman's and Councillor Holz's, and ask the staff to reflect and bring those possible changes to the Chair, Deputy and Mayor?
Just on Councillor Newman's first point around the consents for the water take, that is on page 31 of your agenda.
Sorry, what page?
31.
Thank you, Councillor Newman. And Councillor Hulse. I'll now go back to Councillor Wayne Walker. Another question?
Yeah, just another question, and again, it just may have been an oversight. I'm looking at Pukekohe, which is obviously referenced under Pukekohe, what it will look like in the future.
Is this you're at the development strategy?
Page, no, I'm in a couple of areas, Mr. Chair. One of which, on page 328, references Pukekohe.
328?
328. And then on page 364, there's a reference to Auckland's horticultural production. And the question I would ask, given the submissions on Pukekohe's elite soils, and not just the soil, but the relationship with the frost-free nature of Pukekohe and the importance of its food production for both Auckland and, frankly, New Zealand, my question is why we don't actually reference that more thoroughly. And I asked that question following on from the lead from Councillor Hulse, where the answer was that this document is going to be used as a lead for decisions. And we know that the independent commissioners actually overturned the submission on the part of council to actually protect Pukekohe's elite soils when the council was advocating that a larger quantity be built on. So we know this is a significant issue, a very significant issue for many Aucklanders and for New Zealand. So my question is it just an oversight that we aren't referencing the elite nature of those soils, which is commonly been referred to in the previous Auckland plan and planning documentation, and the relationship with frost, the early to market nature of that production?
We do on the fifth paragraph on page 328.
I'm looking at that now, but it just mentions protection of highly productive soils is critical for the area. It's actually critical for New Zealand, and it mentions surrounding fertile soils, but it's more than just soil. It's a combination of factors that make that area unique in New Zealand.
Councillor Walker, we are just trying to find it. There certainly is text on that. So we specifically talk about the elite soils and the ability that for growing in a much longer season, and we're just trying to find where that is. Okay. It is somewhere there.
If it's somewhere there, that's great. And I also note in the maps under I think rural, and also where I would have expected to find it, I think under risks and opportunities, that's map 12. I didn't see the loss of those soils as being a critical issue to Auckland, which was identified by a number of submitters, and I know I raised this during workshops.
Thank you.
So maybe it's just an oversight, Mr. Chair, and I'm sure it could be corrected.
Well, I think it's there. Yeah. I think you're just looking in the one section, it's supporting information on the nodes, and that section is just very specific words around Pukekohe, and then as Jacques and probably Alec could expand, there is definitely reference to the elite and prime soils and the need to protect those. I just can't put my finger on it.
I didn't find it in the locations where I thought I'd find it, and given the significance and the planning significance of it, I'm just suggesting that it be elevated for consistency, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
So you couldn't find it, and we'll get, look, can the staff just draw through an email to Councillor Walker of where it is?
Yeah. And if you look on map 12, there is a circle protection of prime and elite soils to the south, so it is on the map. It's probably, as you said, maybe trying to find it a lot easier.
Thank you. And it's going to be a lot easier to navigate once it's digital, that's for sure.
And Mr. Chair, just the last thing, at the last workshop on the 28th, you also gave us direction to make it very clear about, in the rural areas, the enabling rural production growth, but not residential growth. So those tweaks are made throughout the whole plan to make that clear that we are supporting production but not residential growth.
Good, thank you. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. I've got the Onehunga Historic Society meeting tonight, so I really do need a really clear direction of where built heritage is being mentioned and protected in the plan. So I see a reference on page 215 to built heritage, then it refers back to homes and places, but there's nothing in there about built heritage. It's about houses and things like that, but not about, you know, old buildings that we want to try and save. It's a priority. Is there something that I'm missing, perhaps?
No. In homes and places, you will find it in, I forget the focus area, number 5, when we talk about creating urban places and spaces. You will find reference to built heritage in there and how that is part of the identity and the character of communities. And when we redevelop, the importance of taking that into account and building it into our new urban fabric. And you will also find it in the belonging and participation in that new quality of life outcome. There's a paragraph or 2 in there specifically around built heritage and how that is part of communities and their quality of life. Okay. So quality of life focus area and homes and places, the places and spaces focus area. And there would be small references in other places throughout the plan. I just can't remember all of them, but those would be the 2 big ones.
It's probably worth mentioning focus area 1 and belonging and participation as well. That talks about the built heritage and the sense of history and attachment to place.
Thank you, Councillor Bartley.
Thank you.
All the questions, I think, are exhausted. We've had, I think, Councillor Casey, I think it's several hundred hours of workshops. But you've got a final question?
No, I want to
Open for comment. So, look, if I could just take you through some slight changes in the reds. There is further work that we'll be doing, so that the Auckland Plan hopefully today is adopted. But then we move into the implementation approach that we'll be taking. We've got those core targets that we'll be looking at and priorities. There are further strategies and plans that will cascade out of this, just as there normally is. That will enable us to start the implementation of what we're signalling through this plan. The amendment is in E is members, I would not like this report to be printed out and go to 140 odd board members. Please, can we make it electronic? And then H, of course, the staff never ever recommend, they thank themselves. But on your behalf, I've drafted the H and not just the staff, but in fact, it's all of those mana whenua and mata waka, the IMSB, Mayor and Mayor's Office, the councillors, all of us, local boards, particularly the chairs that came along, advisory boards, have we got them there? No. We need to add the advisory boards.
Panels.
Advisory panels. Is there anything missing there, members? Can you spot anything from those parties that made significant contributions?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, the Central City Advisory Board came pretty much to every workshop. It's up there.
That's the
Yeah,
advisory
and we'll just advisory boards and panels and boards.
Yeah. As did the university, actually.
They were on behalf of the City Centre Advisory Board. Amy Malcolm, I think, is a member there. I think we've covered it. Anybody now like to speak? I've spoken to the motion. Anybody else would like to speak to the motion? Councillor Hulse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to acknowledge your role. This is a challenging piece of work to steward, and I think you've done an exemplary job. It's you know, the first plan was a bit chaotic, and it was like herding cats. We had all of our different policies from all of our different councils, and we endeavoured to bring them together in one place. And some of our thinking was quite divergent. exceedingly divergent, and we've wrangled it into one place. But we've come a long way, and this is a much more sophisticated plan, and all the better for it. It's also, you know, about making Auckland a sustainable city for the 21st century. But the bit that really excites me is also the people component, and I think it's really well articulated in here, because, and I kind of feel the absence a little bit of Councillor Quack's here, because I've said this, what I'm going to say, a few times, and each time I've said it, he's grumped at me. So, you know, Dick, I'm sorry, sweetheart, I still feel the same way. One of the advantages we've got around amalgamation, and it's articulated here in the plan, particularly with the heat maps, is it is an opportunity to deal to social equality around the region. And if you look at some of our heat maps in here, it's clear that in some parts of our region they're not doing well, and this is our opportunity to retool that, and this is one of the huge advantages of this plan, because being a sustainable 21st century city is also one that has social justice at its heart. And I may have got myself offside with people talking about the fact that in parts of our city we have pretty manky playgrounds, and in other parts of the city we have great playgrounds. A really good litmus test for how we're doing as a city, and we need to simply turn that around. So, Mr. Chair, thank you for carrying on the work of this. This isn't a doorstop, it's a far sleeker machine this time round, and I think the staff who have done that have been extraordinary. And just in closing, I want to thank Jacques. Jacques was there for the first one, day and night, 24 hours a day. I don't know how the man did it. He's been there for the second one, leading his team, and I think Jacques needs to be singled out for some very special acknowledgement here, some bravery and creativity and a monumental amount of patience. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and may this be a really good foundation for building and continuing to build an awesome city.
Councillor Casey.
Well, as most people know, I'm not a creature that likes change very much. Like I sit in the same seat, I have done for all the time I've been in this room. And I used to drive around with the Auckland plan in my boot, a copy of the Auckland plan in my boot, and I raised it on every occasion that I could, especially the chapter relating to people. And I want to say that this new plan, the 23 pages that relate to people, which is belonging and participation, I think we've had epic battles, blood, sweat and tears went into every single one of those words. But for me it now reflects what I'd like to see Auckland become. Because you can have all the finest infrastructure in the world, but if you haven't got a city that's inclusive, where you feel that you belong, then you don't have a livable city. So I want to talk about that particular section, because it's very meaningful to me. Mahatma Gandhi said the true measure of any society is how it treats its most vulnerable members. And within that belonging and participation section are our most vulnerable. And I want to thank the Chair for inviting along our boards and panels, because their contribution was absolutely enormous, especially in this section and in the Homes and Places section. So it wasn't just their submissions, it wasn't just them coming to us as a body, they were actually at the table, and that was phenomenal, and it was a first, and it worked, and we should do it again. In fact, we should keep doing it. I want a copy of it, though. I want a copy of the plan to put in my boot and carry around.
Well,
and
you might not give you one.
There might be more people. I'll buy my own paper and I'll print it out and I'll get a binder, right? You don't have to worry about it. But there might be more people like me. It's just, I want to keep saying that. The seniors panel do make that point that not everybody's computer literate, not everybody has access to a printer, not everybody can go to a library and use the computer. So it's a great aspiration, and I keep telling you that, to be paper-free, but there's a transition period that will take quite a long time, and so while that's great, that we're distributing it electronically, I need to have copies somewhere. So we need copies in a library that somebody can go and pick up, somebody even like me that can go and pick up, but I'm going to print my own copy. So I need to hear that back from you, Jacques, that we're not just being electronic. Okay, we're not doing the massive print run that we did the last time, but that we will have copies in the library. So just on another vulnerable group, and that's the homeless in Auckland, and I'm really pleased to see that that group is referenced both in the belonging and participation section and in the homes and places. And not just referenced, there's a target that we aim to reduce homelessness, and homelessness is one of the measures that we'll be looking at whether we achieve that or not. But it's a simple, for me it's just simple words that really mean a lot. So if you turn to page 114, there's a sentence in there that I wish had been in a couple of years ago when this issue arose. And it's, I'll turn to it and read it out. Create public places that are welcoming to all with inclusive design and architecture. Simple sentence, but guess what that means? It means that the 5 businesses in the centre of Auckland who drench the homeless are actually not what we want for Auckland. And that's us saying it. So that's just great. Not much else to say, but if we create this new city where people belong, our turnout for the last election was 35.5. That's appalling. If people feel they belong and they see themselves reflected in the leadership here and in the staff leadership here, they might be happier to put their name forward to stand and to exercise their democratic right to vote. As for trust in the council, maybe that will go up as well, but I mean, I'm not hanging my hat on that because I don't know how we get to the depths of 15 or 20% where the police have got 96, 97. Maybe it's the uniform. Maybe we need a uniform, Alfie.
Blue one.
Oh, no, we don't.
Pahutakawa? No, maybe not. Maybe not. So what I'm saying is if we have this city where people feel included and belong, we have a happier society and we have a more engaged public, and that will be really good for everybody that lives here. That's it. Thank you so much, Jacques. We've had epic battles on lots of parts of this, but you've won me over. Thank you.
Councillor Casey, I just want to add that you've been a significant contributor right through this. Your voice has been well heard, and I'm really grateful for you going the distance on this. Thank you. Councillor Filipina.
Thank you, Chair. Just as, yeah, look, Jacques, to you, your team, and to you, Chris, and the Planning Committee, but especially to you, thank you so much. You know, Chris, when you opened up with this particular item, you mentioned all the groups that had sort of taken part in this whole process, and I just want to acknowledge the Independent Maori Statutory Board. We know why they are here in regards to making us accountable, and they have done. So ngā mihi ki a koutou katoa to the Independent Maori Statutory Board. Thank you so much, because I think with the emails that I've been receiving around some of the parts of the Auckland Plan in regards to Māori, I mean, it's been a pleasure reading those particular emails that we've all got, and it was even a better pleasure deleting them. So look, I just want to acknowledge the Independent Māori Statutory Board. However, I also want to just to make a comment that it's, although it's the Auckland Plan, it is Auckland's plan. You know, we all got tied up, and we all ended up going to meetings and conversations that said that this was Auckland Council's plan. Well, it's not Auckland Council's plan, and you know, you've been consistent and pushing that as well as our staff and people around this table. It is Auckland's plan, and I want to acknowledge the central government and the work that they have also done around this. Chair, in regards to D, I like D. I wish it was just pushed out a little bit more, because I know, and Penny referenced the first Auckland plan for those that were part of it. And, you know, it's 20 years, but for us, it's, you know, it's going out over a very long period, and having an implementation sort of approach to the core targets is good, because it's so long, and it's out into the future as our strategic plan. As an Auckland strategic plan, it's important that we do ensure that the targets we had if it does go through, and I will be supporting it, that if it goes through, that we ensure that our key stakeholders and our public and our community have been brought with us. So, you know, it's good to have that one in there. Look, yeah, the unitary plan, you mentioned the unitary plan, and Councillor Holson and I, and Councillor Holson in the first term around the unitary plan, it took nearly all of her life, and then in the second term it took 2.5 years of mine in regards to the hearings part of it. But you know, that is the foundation now for us from an Auckland Council perspective, is the unitary plan. And you know, again, for all those that were part of it, the journey from the Auckland Council being, and to all our communities again, it's just awesome. I just look forward to being a part of the journey in regards to the Auckland plan. So, yeah, as I said, Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Filipaina. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will speak frankly. This new Auckland plan is inferior, markedly inferior than the original and existing Auckland plan. It's inferior, markedly inferior into the way it deals with the environment, the way it deals with historic heritage, the way it deals with transport, and with cultural and social infrastructure. There are reasons, moreover, to question the legal validity of this plan. Under Section 79 and 80 of the Local Government Auckland Council Amendment Act, the existing plan, the spatial plan for Auckland, may be, I think it's Section 82, may be amended. This is a complete rewrite. So in terms of the Act, I challenge whether this new version, completely rewritten, complies legally. We are obliged, like everyone else, to follow the law. Our legitimacy is based on acts of Parliament. And in terms of this particular function, we have to comply with the Act. I don't believe we have. In terms of the environment, it's that it was subsumed with cultural heritage and amalgamated with anthropocentric politics is completely unacceptable to me. Direction 1, ensure Auckland's natural environment and cultural heritage is valued and cared for as if they were equal. Apply a Maori worldview to treasure and protect our natural environment. Taonga tuku iho. How? What is that really? And finally, the real doozy. Use Auckland's growth and development to protect and enhance the natural environment. It's just not logical. It's just subverting environmental protection with contemporary, politically correct politics. And so, Mr. Chairman, I cannot support this. I do not believe that it can legitimately replace the existing spatial plan for Auckland, and I've outlined just some of the reasons why I question the legitimacy, the legal validity of this totally rewritten Auckland plan.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to quickly thank the staff and everyone involved in this plan. It's been a huge amount of work, and every question that was asked or every bit of abuse that was thrown at you or whatever you came forward with the answers, the science, the facts and everything else to back it up. So thank you all for what you've done here. I think this is a great plan. I think it also ties together what has been 8 years of a new council and a whole lot of plans and directions. The last Auckland plan helped guide the unitary plan. The unitary plan's done, almost done, but basically done. It was driven by the last Auckland plan. We've got the unitary plan. The advisory panels, Kathy, I think have had a huge positive effect on this council and the city and fed into a lot of this. Sometimes those advisory panels are controversial to set up, and they are actually so important to the plan. We've got climate change in here. No one's debating the science anymore. We've got walking and cycling, connecting our city up, the intensification and why that's important. Around coastal erosion, there is the Maori Identity section is what I believe is fantastic and actually shows the theme. Our city, our point of difference is our Maori culture, our heritage, not just the people, but what that identity is weaved into our city, in the landscape, in the architecture, in the everything we do, basically. And I'm glad that lens is right across this plan, and it does. It is what makes us unique, but it's also what is the whenua, the foundation for this plan, but also for Auckland. Before Councillor Lee spoke about that, I really like that we have the Maori worldview incorporated in the environment. It's a different way of looking at the environment, but I think it's holistic and important, and it's about, it's how every bit of poison we put into one part of the waterways is the whole water. It's one body of water. It's how we treat the environment completely different, rather than just a mechanism for things to happen, but it's more tangible. It's the kaitiaki, where the kaitiaki of Auckland everyone is, and how that all embeds across the plan. I think that there's youth that are mentioned throughout, and it's a more positive plan. I think we talk about focusing, investing in people rather than the problems. I think we're celebrating diversity instead of seeing it as an issue of division. We're throughout, I just see it so much more positive. I'm glad we strengthened the heritage part. I'm glad we strengthened the arts and culture and sports parts of this plan, which then also connect in all the infrastructure stuff. Obviously that's important, but like we have with the lots of the parts of the 10-year budget, we've actually made sure that those parts of Auckland are important, just as all the issues and challenges we're facing. I commend you two, Chair, for helping us all through that, the local boards, the people. Not everyone could make every meeting, but I think everyone who put their views in have been taken up. And like everyone says, it's Auckland's plan. It's not just Council's plan. A lot of people, when the first Auckland plan, were confused. Why are we talking about health and education and all those sorts of factors? But I think it's incumbent on us to have all of this somewhere where everyone can pick up. And I've worked with the team on the app, and I think the app is good, not just for the focus forward, but also reading what we're doing in Auckland. If an outsider can look in and go, wow, that's, Auckland looks pretty cool. So, I'm really happy with the direction. The way it will sit, or does sit already if it's launched on the app, is easy to see. The maps, everything is incorporated. So I think it's a great holistic plan for Auckland, and I'm excited. It's much more diverse, and I'm sure we're going to continue to use this for the years to come until we have to review it again, whoever does that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hills. I've got Member Ngamani, then Councillors Watson, Sayers, Councillor Wayne Walker, and then the Deputy Mayor. Member Ngamani.
Kia ora. I firstly want to acknowledge Council staff and also our own staff of the Independent Māori Stat Board that have worked alongside you to produce what I think is a really well-rounded and relevant plan for the future. I also want to acknowledge the increased participation of Māori in the process. And I think that that's helped shape a much better plan, a much more relevant plan to Auckland. And the effort that was put in relation to that, well done. I also want to acknowledge the councillors, the chair and councillors for being a tolerant council. 10, 15 years ago would have never seen some of the drivers that are in this plan even see the light of day. And it's good to know moving forward we have a tolerant council that's willing to explore all the opportunities that are open to both Māori and Pākehā and all cultures that reside in Tāmaki. The plan recognises the treaty as a foundation document. That's important. That provides a framework for partnership with both Mātau Waka and Mana Whenua, and also provides an important framework for a multicultural, intercultural community. That's Auckland. Central to the Auckland plan, central in terms of the Māori outcomes, is the outcome of Māori identity and wellbeing. And there are some really important directions that sit in that for Māori. Advance Māori wellbeing, promote Māori success, innovation and enterprise, recognise and provide for te tiriti or waitangi outcomes, showcase Auckland's Māori identity and vibrant Māori culture. So, and then of course there are important outcomes that sit in, important focus areas that sit in the other elements, whether it be housing need of Māori, or the protection of the environment, bringing in the Māori world view of that, something that's been historically and traditionally here in Tāmaki, and it's nice to see things come into a cycle. So I am happy that I think some of the more nasty messaging around the place of Māori in Tāmaki has been put in its proper context, which is, it certainly is a body of thinking. It's a body of thinking that's going. And I think what we've done is create a plan that's relevant to the population that lives in Tāmaki today, and most definitely the population that will live in Tāmaki tomorrow and in the future. So that's pretty much lots of bouquets, and the challenge will of course be in how this information, how this framework is used to inform decisions on programs and budgets, of course, in the LTP. So that keeps us busy in terms of monitoring the council's good intent and watching that hopefully move through towards implementation. It also highlights a lot of body of work that's been identified and getting better measures and targets around these matters, and that's also something that the Independent Māori Statutory Board looks forward to working with council to, work out that detail. But yep, we'll certainly be supporting the Auckland plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Namani. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the staff for all their work. I've got a kind of an unusual request. I would perhaps like to see the belonging and participation section, if that could maybe be left out or maybe redacted even in the copy that's going out to big chunks of my ward. And I say that because if I look at Focus Area 1, creating safe opportunities for people to meet, connect, participate in and enjoy community and civic life. A little hard to enjoy civic life when the council's just sold the only civic space in your entire community. That would make Focus Area 1 a little difficult to achieve, I think, and And if I go a little further on to focus area 3, we have the comment, many people expect to have a more active role in decision making when decisions affect their well-being, their home, their community or their area of interest. In the aforementioned incident there with the sale of their civic space, there was no consultation at all, not a single word. I know some people seem to think telling councillors what is going to happen constitutes consultation, but I thought consultation was actually going out to talk to the public, or in this case, the affected community. So I'm having a little difficulty reconciling the fine words, and they are wonderful words, they say all the right things, with the yawning gap, or the glaring gulf with what happens in reality, particularly in this belonging and participation section of the report. And I continue further, and I must admit I've largely confined myself to the belonging and participation outcome. I see a little later on then mechanisms used to work together. Auckland Council embraces an empowered community approach where individuals, communities have the power and ability to influence decisions. Influence decisions. Well, maybe I'm having a bad run of it, Mr. Chair, but all around my ward at the moment, I have quite the opposite reaction from people in the Hibiscus Coast, in West Harbour, in East Coast Bays. No matter where I go, I encounter a rather disturbing cynicism and a strong conviction they have no ability to influence decisions, and often decisions made on the most tenuous of grounds. So I appreciate the effort's gone in here. It says all the right things. It means nothing if it's not backed up out in the community. And those instances I've just quoted now are living proof for that. So I don't want to rain on the parade, Mr. Chair, but I suspect if you talk to people out there, they would find some of these statements a little hard to reconcile with what actually happens in their community. And I feel obligated to make that point. I know that maybe won't make me flavour of the month, but that's the reality of what's going down in the Albany ward right now.
Thank you. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to highlight a concern that I have around perhaps Auckland's biggest issue, or being addressed, but perhaps feeling that it's diluted, and it not being the primary focus of this Auckland plan. And it worries me that perhaps as a result of that, budget and time and energy might go into 6 areas rather than perhaps dominating in one particular area. And the biggest issue for Auckland, even bigger than transport, is the housing affordability issue that we're facing, where people can't afford to either to stay on their homes, or young people being able to rent or get into their homes. So yes, it worries me that there's 6 outcomes there that are perhaps, as you read it, perhaps evenly weighted, where I would probably felt more comfortable if knowing if one was around housing affordability was particularly weighted more seriously than others. It worries me that because of that, the measures, we don't have a measure of a clear measure in my mind where we are at with the housing affordability, and so what does that mean for Auckland? I mean, that is our number 1 issue, so I think there's a gap there at the moment, Mr. Chair. And also, where are we going? So we've got measures there. The cost of a home compared to average annual income is one of them, but we don't have that target. I would rather perhaps have seen housing affordability as a primary focus, and the other 5 outcomes as perhaps resultant of those. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. I've got some issues that I'll raise, and I have been consistent in raising these issues in workshops. I think the first thing that concerns me is the structure of the plan and that particularly reflects the submissions made by sporting, recreational groups, heritage groups, cultural groups, environment groups, pointing out that the plan was difficult for them to relate to. In fact, in a number of instances, there was scarcely anything that you could find when you Googled a particular word to find a reference. And I do note, Mr. Chair, that we have made some corrections. We've put in some quality of life stuff and we've bolted something on. But I think what those submitters were looking for was a change right up front. And these areas around belonging and participation, homes and places and the like, are sometimes very difficult for people to relate to when it comes to specific interests that they might have, and I reflect on all of those comments I made around environment and heritage and so on. So, in contrast, I found the earlier Auckland plan easier to relate to. I found that people related to it earlier, and I'm disappointed that there is not a more effective relationship between this plan and the previous plan, which I was very involved with because I was a councillor when that plan went through, and there was a huge amount of engagement and effort, and I would suggest community ownership of that plan as compared to, I think, this plan. So this is a plan, I think, that is less owned by Auckland than the previous plan. The other issue that I want to raise is that I think this plan is too permissive around growth, and it really does not address the issue around the limits to growth in Auckland. The state of our environment is, to use a word I used before, grim. It's severe. That goes to the Hauraki Gulf, but it also goes to the land, the sedimentation that we're seeing around our coastlines and the like is absolutely horrific. So I don't see the tension in here. I don't see the commentary on that. That historically was the case when we had the previous Auckland Regional Council, and I refer to the earlier plan where that tension was there. So this is much more permissive, and I did note that there was a commentary earlier talking about, I can't remember what it was, how many millions, Jacques, 3.5, 4, 5 million population in Auckland as a potential scenario. And I would suggest there are some very real concerns around that because of Auckland's geography. And I guess the other tension that's not apparent in this plan is the sell down that's occurring in assets, strategic assets across the region. That's certainly happening in my ward. The trade that's occurring in respect of the legacy provision of assets, and thinking particularly in terms of park and recreation space. So the forecast going forward in Auckland, especially in greenfield areas and brownfield areas, is not good at all. There is a reference in the document about development and the like paying its way, but that's still not happening. And I think you know that, Mr. Chair. The development community is getting off very, very lightly in terms of the true costs of growth, of a quantum order, which means that existing ratepayers are effectively providing a massive subsidy for this level of growth. And the faster that growth occurs, the larger that subsidy is. So that is a very considerable strategic issue. I am encouraged that this plan is a digital plan, and I would hope that as a consequence there is an opportunity for Aucklanders to own it more than what I would suggest they do now. So I have very real concerns around this plan, Mr. Chair, as I've indicated on many occasions, and I have raised through some questions today.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When you're building something, you always have a plan. Here we're not just building a house, we're building a whole suburb, and this is a complicated blueprint of how Auckland's going to move forward. And yes, it's had its controversies on the way through, and the old coffee table or doorstop version we had in the last term, that started off as an amalgam of the existing plans. It was and is past its use by date, and we've moved forward to a more modern interpretation of what we perceive to be Auckland's best future. And you don't get a really good sense of that till you actually go into it digitally. And I've been lucky enough to have a couple of cracks at that where you flow down through some examples and you get more detail. But the other point that's actually vitally important is the detail of each chapter is not siloed. It's actually cross-linked through to other chapters. So it's that matrix of information, that matrix of ideas and concepts, that's the important part. And you don't get that until you actually navigate your way through this document digitally. So I'm really looking forward when we get the final version, the modern version, the laid out version, the version that can be moved and amended with ease in the future as the city migrates into new and better spaces. So thank you to everyone for the work. It isn't always easy, and sometimes blueprints have to be altered on the way through. And this one has been and will be in the future. So to all of the team, and also to the Crown agencies, who have by and large, I believe, given this a tick, then it's a good start, Mr. Chair, that can be added to and altered for a good blueprint on how we are going to progress forward.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Collins.
Oh, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to, I wanted to give some space between what Councillor Casey said, because some of what she had in her words covered off some of mine, so my speech is very short now as a result. I just wanted to focus my attention on the TSI, some of the work that's gone on out south and Pacific coming through. Well done, Chair, on guiding us through this process. It was very different to the process we have at church when we're setting our visions at church. We only do ours over 5 years, though, because often it's the pastor who has the final say and you kind of just nod your head. So this has been really good because we've had the ability to have our voices heard. So on the ideas around inclusion and belonging, I see words that welcome, embrace, understand, difference. I remember the discussion we had, Alec, going back a little bit into one of those workshops around the difference between, or the emerging difference in the academy between the notions of equity and diversity. And I think a lot of the wording reflects an equity approach, which pleases me, because I think as the notion of diversity has emerged and has become a bit of a fashionable term to use, we forget that it's diversity and inclusion, and it's the inclusion bit that takes us back to equity. So I like to see, I enjoy reading this part as how we're going to make this happen. The idea of inclusion is and a sense of belonging in our city is something that I reflect on often. Tomorrow I'll be speaking to all the district court judges of New Zealand about how South Auckland works in their frame of mind and the young people that they see prior to sentencing. And I want to talk about how an inclusive city could change the fact that it would no longer be, going to 2050, just young Māori and Pacific who are standing in front of these judges. So come 2050, I do wonder what it will look like for Māori and Pacific, for South Auckland, and what the city will be, how it will include them. There's a part here in the report talking about how Pacific Maker are going to be vibrant as far as the future socio-economic development of the city is concerned. When we were out, when this council was consulting last year on the public safety and nuisance bylaw, we asked Aucklanders what makes you feel safe, what makes you feel like you're included. But also included in that was a question of, well, what makes you feel unsafe? And here's the number one thing that came out of that piece of researched information, that the thing or the person or the type of person that made people fear, that created the most fear in Auckland, was someone who was male, who was tall, who was brown, and who wore hoodies. I was tempted to dress like that today, which is my normal wear out south. But sir, the point I'm trying to make of that is, as we become this 2050 city, as we forward look ourselves to being this visionary city that is inclusive, it is those perceptions that we need to change. Because essentially what we're saying is Auckland fears an elected councillor. And we can change that by being an inclusive city, by ensuring that everyone understands, embraces, and welcomes difference. That we're not going to be, as I talked about in a session I led a couple of years ago, that we wouldn't be a city that is segregated by decile, because that's what school deciles do to us. They segregate us. And I think a city whose walls have come down, who are much more understanding, is going to be the city that we want moving forward. That is the city that I think the onus is on us to create and to facilitate. And so as we take a social justice approach, as we take an inclusive approach, as we take an approach that ensures that every person in this city feels like they're a part of it, feels like they belong, then I think we are creating the most livable city, notwithstanding the truth and the reality around homelessness that exists in this city. And I would remind this council again that 80,000 people of Pacific heritage are in that data of homelessness and overcrowded housing. That's the kind of stuff we can change. So I'm excited about going forward, and I'm excited that there are voices here that are going to be included in that. And can I just finish by saying we're talking a lot these days about matching the data, and there are 14–15% Pacific in Auckland, and we now have 11% of Pacific around this table. So changes are happening. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. Enlightening words, and I think we can close the debate on those words. Oh, I did have Councillor Filipino again.
Sorry, Chair, I have spoken, but I mean, it's just been brought to my attention after texting with Councillor Collins around the Southern Initiative, and I therefore have a question around it. Jacques, many months ago when we started this process, and we spoke about these. Sorry, Chair, so if it's okay.
Yeah, it's a wee bit irregular, so I'm breaking my.
Yeah, sorry,
our
I
own
needed
rules.
to.
Can I?
Yep.
I'm reminded of the rules and the standing orders. Is it a question that can be taken offline?
Well,
Because we've
Chair,
now
no,
completed
because,
the debate.
No, and this is why I was reluctant to put my hand up again, and that is because if this passes, what happens in the Southern Initiative from my perspective?
Can we pose the question to the staff?
So that's why I was very reluctant to sort of put it there. So Jacques, I spoke to you months ago around the Southern Initiative, and especially in regards to the 6 priorities that were in the original, or the first, not the original, but the first Auckland plan. And there was a commitment by yourself that the 6 priorities would be in this particular Auckland plan. I've just been told, and Chair, you know, again, I've just been told that those priorities are no longer in there, but it's now sort of turned into a supportive role. And so, look, I just want to ensure, because Councillor Collins was the one that asked me about the Southern Initiative, and I said, no, look, those 6 priorities.
Let's get an answer.
Yeah, so look, Jacques, I've just been told now that they are no longer as priorities. It's there, and that the Southern Initiative will end up basically just being a supportive role. And I've read the plan, which I have in front of me.
I assure you it's not lost. Jacques.
There were no submissions on this section of the plan, so you will find on page 99 of the agenda is the bit on the Southern Initiative, and it clearly states the 6 priorities of the Southern Initiative.
So
no changes to that.
Well, okay, I just want to be rest assured, because
Page 99.
looking at this particular document, it doesn't. It says that that you had spoken to Gail, and that she said, no, look, we will end up having a supportive role. So I want to make sure that those objectives are still in there, and that's under Focus 6, under belonging and
I can see it.
participation. So
It's on 99. It's the supporting.
I've got the documents here.
Yep.
And Chair,
It's
if you
there
read
in
further.
black and white.
Yeah, well, if you read further, it's got here how the Southern Initiative started, and then it's the highlights of the Southern Initiative. So I just want to make sure that those 6 objectives are still in there. And they are 6 priorities.
Yeah, as I say, there weren't any submissions that required any changes to this, so
Oh,
no
that's-
change have been made.
Okay, I'll
It's all
just...
there. Okay, I think we need to conclude. Thank you for that last question. And the motions are there. I'll put it in all together, and I'll just take the voice vote. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
The contrary, no.
No. Record my vote against.
Okay, well, who would like recorded? I heard a few no's there. Councillor Lee, Councillor Walker, Councillor Watson. Thank you.
You can record mine if you want to, Chris, yeah.
And, well, it's not about for my want, it's your want. So we'll call Councillor Sayers, Watson, Walker, Lee.
Through you, Mr Chair.
Question?
I just have a question. I mean, there are...
Sorry, I just need to declare the vote is carried and we'll record. Question?
Just in respect of the recording, I don't have an issue with all of the items. Is it possible for me to record the particular things that I do have an issue with? Because you didn't give an opportunity to take them, obviously, one at a time.
Okay. Councillor Lee, you're recording your vote against all the motions? All the motions. Councillor Walker?
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple. Councillor Walker, what are you recording your vote against?
Well, I'm happy just to deal with that later with the officers.
It's best if we deal with it now because this is actually the meeting and you need to convey it. Councillor Watson?
Keeping it simple.
Everything? Councillor Sayers?
Simple.
Simple. Thank you. Going back to you, Councillor Walker.
It's a bit complicated, so I'll stick with going against the lot.
Okay, thank you.
Just to make it easy for you, Mr Chair.
It's not about ease for me, I'm just wanting the record to be straight. That's good. Staff, fantastic, thank you all. And we'll take I think we'll take a 10-minute break and be back here. It's an 8-minute break, it's 1:45. 1:45.